Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're calling in from, signing in from. My name is Kumar Datatran, and we are live for our Agile Shorts. Whoa, I hear an echo. Why? Oh, I see why. I see. Okay, let me close that. I had YouTube open, and so it was repeating what I was saying, obviously, because it's a little bit delayed. Well, with me today is my good friend and former colleague, Mark Grove, and uh, I'm going to let Mark introduce himself here in a second. Just wanted to say that I've always enjoyed working with him. We actually used to be neighbors, not that
Right.
long ago, 10 years ago or so,
That's right.
before he moved. Once I moved in the neighborhood, he moved out. So I,
Just a coincidence. Just a coincidence.
right. So Mark, why don't you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate that. My name is Mark Grove. I am a managing consultant and an agile coach based out of the Northern Virginia area, just out of Washington, D.C., or outside of Washington, D.C. I work for a company called Excella. And I have been an agile coach well, for about 10 years now in the agile space since 2009. And I have a love affair, I guess you could say, with Kanban in particular. And I'm a Kanban trainer through Kanban University. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we do have just a shameless plug here. We do have a class that Agile Meridian is hosting, and Mark here is going to be the learning facilitator. I don't like to call it trainer because trainer has a different meaning than what I like to think of someone like you or me delivering a class. We facilitate learning.
I like that.
Uh, Trainer is more like you go to the circus and you see those the trainers training their animals and to do certain tricks, and that's not what we do, right, Mark?
That's right. We try not to as best as we can. That's right. We want people to learn. We want people to experience what we're teaching in real time as best that we can, so that
Yeah,
they. So maybe that is more than just a simple train, as you were explaining it.
right, exactly. I think that training is more than just learning the steps. It's understanding the why behind the steps that makes that training stick. And I know that the way you train and the way I train, we share this. We try to make sure that we explain the why behind the what so that people will remember, even if they forget the steps, they will remember the why and be able to implement the steps in their own way to produce the outcome.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. It's easy to do the what, but lots of times, excuse me, lots of times it gets lost in the why behind it.
Right.
And what people end up sometimes doing, in my experience, is they do a lot of what, they do a lot of things that they were just told to do, and but they don't pause to think about why that is the case. And then to your point, they don't have at least they don't realize they may have more of an ability to tailor these steps to help fit their particular need when they don't have that why behind them.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's good to have that ability, that latitude a little bit to adjust how you're working so that you can, fit your particular organization or the way you work, your environment, but still stick behind the purpose and the reasoning behind it by knowing that why.
Yeah. So you mentioned Kanban, and that's been a love affair of yours. Can you talk a little bit about why, speaking of whys and whats, why
Right.
that is the case?
Why is that the case? For me, it was something that it made a lot of sense to me. When you think about getting work to done or taking on work and understanding work that needs to be completed, we pretty much work, whether we realize it or not, we work in some type of flow environment. And when we, make that explicit and understand what that looks like and how to interact with it and get it to a point where we say, okay, now we're done with it. um, I think that being explicit about that really begins to help us better manage the work that we have, better understand who's doing the work, better understand where do we need to go to do the work. And I say that when I picture having some type of scrum board or a Kanban board in front of you with your work laid out, but knowing where on the board you need to go based on um, what's going on that particular day and how many
Hmm.
people are working, etc. I think all of those components really make sense within that context of work flowing from a beginning state to an end state. And
Hmm.
I love it. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big reason why I really like it. I could go
Yeah.
on, but I'll pause there for now.
You said something really interesting. It's that most of us work this way anyway,
Yeah.
and so Kanban is. I think you made the statement that it's easier to understand, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and if that's so, why don't more people use it? What is preventing people from limiting? You're going to use some Kanban terms, which I'm sure you'll understand. You'll explain. Why is it so difficult for people to limit the work in progress so they can focus on the most important things? Why is it so difficult for people to help other people on their team and their department if things get stuck and so on? What's preventing that?
Well, I think lots of times what prevents it or makes it very difficult to see is because you're not seeing it.
Mm,
You're not visualizing it. That's one of the first practices of Kanban is to visualize your work. And when we don't visualize it or have mechanisms to easily visualize it, it gets hidden. And so you mentioned about limiting, WIP. That is the second practice of Kanban. It's hard to limit your work if you don't have a way to see what you're working on. And
yeah,
especially if you are working with a group of people, not only see what you're doing, but seeing what your team is doing, it gets really hard. And so I think
yeah.
that's really a really big reason, or one big reason is because it's hard to visualize what you're doing if you don't take the time to try to see it.
Very good points. Yeah, I do agree that the first step is visualizing the work. And I mean, that is the first step, right? The first step in Kanban is to visualize your work. And most teams that are not employing these practices, they don't do it or don't do, maybe they're not using the appropriate tools to do that. And for those of you watching, I see there's at least two people that are online. Please ask your questions. Mark, as I see them come in, I will post them up, and
Sure.
we can answer your questions live. So where was I? Yeah, visualizing the work. Maybe it's the wrong tools. It's the maybe the lack of awareness that is a practice. So when you go into an organization, right, you're fresh in, and you're going in as an agile coach, and they're like, oh, Mark, help us get better. What are some things that you do to assess where teams are, and at what point do you have the conversation about the Kanban conversation, if you want to call it that, or what do you do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, personally, I would want to have it ASAP. And one of the big reasons is because, and what a lot of people don't necessarily latch onto, or maybe not even know or recognize, is that Kanban is a management method. And so, regardless of the type of, regardless of the framework that you might be using or how you go about right now getting your work done, you can apply Kanban ideas, concepts, tools, if you will. You can apply it on top of that. So there's really no reason to take the ideas behind Kanban and begin using them right away, right
Mm,
away. And where I see this a lot is, or where this could apply a lot in particular, is with Scrum teams.
mm,
Lots of times, there's the thought out there that you either are a Scrum team or a Kanban team, when in reality, you would think of Kanban being placed on top of the Scrum framework. You can use the tools that Kanban provides, on top of Scrum. And so to answer your question, I'm taking a long way to get there, but yeah, I would introduce Kanban ideas right away.
Mhm.
It just makes sense. Well, I mean, but
Sure.
you got to get there first.
What about teams that are not technology teams? They're not building products, they're doing something else.
Yeah, a lot of professional services teams are perfect though for Kanban. I've worked with marketing companies, public relations companies, and they obviously are not technical IT per se, but they still have knowledge work that they are completing. And a lot of that work resides in their heads, and they need ways to better manage these things. How can we make this work that we're doing more visible? How can we better manage our dependencies? How do we understand who's doing what? And where can we put our people to maximize getting that work to done as effectively as possible?
Hmm.
You don't have to be an IT team to have these problems or these challenges. So it's good for anyone.
That's great. So we covered a couple of the principles, if you will. Would you mind just running through them, all of them? What are they? What are kind of the steps if you want to implement Kanban? Again, this is the what, right? And what are they?
All right, I knew you were going to ask me that. Now the pressure's on. So it's been a while. No, yeah. So the practices are visualizing your workflow, and then limiting WIP, managing your workflow, making your policies explicit, implementing feedback loops, and then also the last one is you want to experiment and use that as a means to improve.
Yeah,
It's experimentation.
yeah.
So I could talk about each of those, but those are the practices. Now, how you get to those practices, for example, Kanban University has something called static, which is the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban. And I think that's an absolutely great session, or excuse me, great opportunity. Uh, I think that is a great approach for opportunities that want to learn more about Kanban. And I can talk more about that too. But so between the static approach and the practices that really get you into a good place. And I'll also say real quickly that for those who take, and Kumar mentioned this earlier, but we do have a training coming up. And what a lot of people like about this particular training is on day 2, we walk through Kanban system design, that day 2 training, we walk through that static approach so that you can walk away at the end of the day. And believe me, I've seen lots of groups do this. You walk away with something that you can actually use at work the next day.
And what is the static approach, Mark?
Sure. So static is the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban, obviously an acronym. And it breaks down a holistic systemic view of your organization, your work environment, facilitated by a Kanban coach like myself. And we would look at things like, what is your customer complaining about right now? You're a service delivery, presumably. Are you delivering what your customer wants? And if not, why not? So your internal strifes, those would be external strifes. What does your customer think is going wrong? How would we would talk about that. We would facilitate a whole discussion. It's not just talking about it. Internally, though, we would also ask the people that you're working with, what do you think is going wrong? Why are you having difficulties? And we see lots of things like the usual stuff. There's dependencies. Our work is hidden. We don't know where things are. When you begin to talk about that type of those issues, you begin to kind of break away a little bit what those barriers are and how to approach them. That's just one step.
Mm,
We would also begin to, I'm not going in the exact order, but we would also begin to talk about your work item type. So what's the type of work that you're being asked to work on?
yeah.
We would um, model your workflow, which a lot of people like doing. Like, let's stop talking about our workflow. Let's actually get an idea of what it looks like, a visual idea. So we would model your workflow. We would talk about class as a service. it goes on and on. We talk about metrics, but all of that is what makes up static. And it is, I've done it multiple times, and it's a great way to get a team kickstarted off the ground running with Kanban.
That partially answers the question that someone asked, biggest challenges when helping teams implement Kanban and how you address them. So it sounds like you start with the static approach, which is this, again, the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban. And that helps address maybe the first part of it, but it doesn't answer the question fully. Like, what are some challenges that you face when you're trying to implement Kanban with teams?
Yeah, and you can imagine there's a lot.
Yeah.
One of the challenges, I worked for a very, very large financial organization not too long ago. And one of the big hurdles I found there was going back to something I said earlier. People thought you could either be Kanban or Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the challenges was, we're a Scrum team. We don't need Kanban ideas. Well, I stopped using Kanban. I would just try these ideas with them. I wouldn't even, you learn not to even use the word Kanban anymore. But that could be a challenge where you're like, hey, I've got, let's implement Kanban. Well, we can't. We're a Scrum team. So one challenge would be just educating people to understand that it's a management method. It is not a framework. It is not a process. It's a method to manage your knowledge work. So that would be one challenge. But let's say you get yourself in the door there, and you can begin. At least they'll listen to you, and you can begin there. I would say another challenge would be people wanting to. It's really getting buy-in to understand what you're trying to do with Kanban. So even if you get your foot in the door, going through those static steps and having people see how this all ties in, people have to be a little bit patient and let the magic work over time. I see that as being another challenge where they want, just show me what to do. And it's not about just what to do, but the thinking behind it. There's a lot of thinking and experimenting, going back to the sixth practice, behind Kanban. You need the patience and the time to actually let things play out. Use metrics if you want to see, are these decisions that I'm making good or bad, and what do my metrics say? But let things play out so that you can make better decisions based on that.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. So I hope that answered the question. If you're still viewing the video, just post a comment. If you have a follow-up question, anyone else that's joined, post a question for Mark. And I want to just point out that static it's a really powerful tool. And in the second day of the class that Mark will be teaching in a couple of weeks, you will get to experience that, the entire static method, where it's a simulation, and you'll go through the whole static method to be able to implement Kanban using that as a framework, as a tool. And I will say that I've been through the class. I took the class with Mark, and static seems like an incredible way to approach any kind of transformation with a team. Forget Kanban, because the questions that are asked there apply to any team doing anything. Again, you can take the word Kanban out if people don't want to. They're like, we don't want that Agile stuff. It's that Agile mumbo jumbo. No, take the word Kanban out, but still the value in static is so great that you can use it and help teams improve.
Yeah,
there is a follow-up question. I'm going to put it up on the screen. It seems that one of the challenges is the human element of teams changing how they work. That can be another challenge. It's from Catherine Komba, I think is how it's pronounced.
Yes, I would agree with that. That certainly can be a challenge. And so one of the ways Kanban and Kanban coaches, trainers try to address this is, and what turns a lot of people on, actually, I feel, is that we have the saying, you start with what you do now. And so it's not meant to be a big bang change approach. Big bang being the operative words here, and not, you walk in and all of a sudden everyone's got new roles, everyone's got to do things differently. Let's take your current process let's be explicit about it. Let's take the moment to be explicit about it. Let's take your current process and begin to model it. Let's visualize it. Let's understand what goes on in this. And then let's gain agreement that we do want to improve upon it. And so there we feel that the challenges might be lessened a little bit because people aren't as scared of having a big bang approach. But you're right, the human element is always going to be a challenge. And you can lead the animal or horse to the river, but you can't make them drink. That's true. If you have someone who doesn't care, doesn't want to improve, then that will always be a challenge.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of coaching, right? And mentoring. It's the people on the team may not want it. They may be reluctant to change the way they work. They're happy with the way they work. Who is this coach coming in and telling me I have to change? I have to visualize my work. I have to go to a stand-up every day and tell other people on my team or the group that I'm in what I'm working on. No, I work alone. I don't need to tell anybody these things. I work alone. Work is fine. And therein is the challenge, right? If you're changing the culture to be more collaborative and more supportive, that there's going to be resistance to that. And that's where, as coaches, and leaders, really, the leaders of the organization, the job that they have to do is very hard, right? To get buy-in into the change from different levels in the organization, find the catalysts in the organization to support that change, and then have people like Mark to come in and help shepherd that change. Coaches aren't necessarily going to be able to do it without that kind of help, right?
Sure.
And that's the key, is to get people in the organization to help drive that change. A little off topic. So the class coming up, what can people expect when they are done? So they get a certification, great, yay. So what?
Right. I would hope that people take the class not just to have a certification, but to actually get something out of it. And though you, of course, will get your certification. But what would you get out of it? Again, the reason why I think this class is really, really great, and the feedback that we get, helps support this, is that I really feel, first of all, the class Kanban system design. So it's how do you design, it focuses on how to design a Kanban system. Okay, the system in which you are currently working is what we will use those practices on, use the static approach on to design. And you will walk out at the end of the class with something that you can implement in real time. In that second day, we ask for volunteers to bring, well, actually, I would do it on the end of the first day, but to come to the next day's class with a real world work scenario that you're currently experiencing, that you would like to build. You understand better how to build a Kanban system around it. And people do that. And it's a lot of fun to work all day long on having them build that out. And like I said, the feedback we get is they take it to work and they're able to actually walk in the next day with something tangible, if you will, that they can use as a springboard for better improvements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And really, Kanban can be used for just about anything, which is what I love most about it. And I know we're running long here. I just remember using it with my kids when they were growing up. We had a Kanban board and they had their homework on it and so on and so forth, and their chores and whatnot. And it works very well as a personal tool as well, to help you organize your life and make sure you're focused on the things that are most important to you.
Oh, you can't see. There's my Kanban. I have my background blurred, but
yeah,
mine's on the back of my door.
yeah, I use it all the time. It's not on a physical board because I travel a bit for work, and so it's on my computer and on my phone. So I'm never far from my board.
Right.
All right. I'm going to see if there's any other questions from the audience. Please ask them. And while they're doing that, I want to thank you, Mark, for being here today. Visit the website if you're interested in learning more. Join our community. There's a lot of resources that will help you learn something about Kanban, totally free. They're available for you on the community. Just go to agilemeridian.com/community to join, and you can. There's a ton of resources, and hopefully, if you feel inclined, this certification is super valuable because again, it gives you some real skills to go out and apply immediately after class. It will change how you look at work. I guarantee it. I learned Kanban a long time ago. I remember I was working at a client site. I was a Scrum Master, and I didn't know what this Kanban thing was. I'm like, Kanban, what is that? And it really did change my life. I used it. It helped my team become incredibly efficient and productive. And of course, I had the benefit of having a team that was willing to try out these things, right? And these concepts. They were a Scrum team, but they were using Kanban layered on top. Anything you'd like to say before we sign off, Mark?
If you haven't taken the class, take this opportunity to look into it more, like Kumar was saying, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to learn more. And thank you again, Kumar and Agile Meridian, for having me today.
Of course. Thanks, and thanks for all that joined live. And we will see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.